When we're working in motion graphics, sometimes we encounter situations in which we have animated something, say a title or a graphic, and then we place that graphic in another composition. And it turns out that we need to stretch the time for that composition, for the pre-composition, in order to fit the new composition. So when that happens, usually we can extend it, but it changes the length of the keyframes, the speed of playback, because we're stretching time. In order to protect the speed of playback, in order to be able to maintain the work that we've done, we utilize something called responsive design. Responsive design is basically a way of maintaining the amount of time, the speed of playback of something you have created by creating protected areas within a composition. So let's take a look at how this is done. In this composition, I'm going to create a new shape layer really quick. And then I'm going to drop in a rectangle. And I'm going to drop in a stroke. I'm going to change the color of the stroke to something visible. Let's say red. And I'm going to make it about 10 point. And I am also going to round the edges on this thing, the corner, sorry. So I'm going to increase them. I'm just going to eyeball this one just to get something soft. There you go. That works. And I'm going to make my rectangle about 200. By default, it is 100. So I'm going to make it 200 pixels. And then I want to rotate this entire thing. So to rotate this entire thing, I don't want to rotate the layer. I simply want to rotate these guys. So I'm going to group them. To create a group, I could call it box or give it a name if something that identifies it. And that box now has transformation values because it's a group. And I can go ahead and create a rotation of about 45-degree angle. Now, to the rectangle path that's inside the box, I'm going to add a trim paths option. And the trim paths, I'm going to start at around, let's say, 10. And maybe end it at 90, let's say. Maybe even more. Let's start at 0 and end it at 90, something like this. And I want to change the sharpness of the edge of that stroke. So I want to dig in and change the line cap to round cap so that it's smooth. Perhaps I want to increase this to about 20. Let's say 20 works. That's fine. Now, let me go ahead and make a copy of this guy. And actually, I want to eventually animate the offset on the trim paths. That's what I want to. I want this to be rotating like this. And for the reason I'm doing this is because someone actually asked me how I did the lines on the 3D geometry, example, and this is how I did it. And now let me go ahead and create a copy of this. And on the copy, I'm going to scale that down a bit. So I am going to go to the transformation for box 2. I want to scale it down to about, let's say, 80%, maybe even less. I also want to probably reduce the width of the stroke a little bit now that I see it is a bit thick. So let me make it about, 10 is too little, 15. And let me change the one from the original as well. So I want to start using my filter. So let me go ahead and use this. Actually, let's do it this way. It's probably faster if I just get into that and change it this way. Boom. Okay. So now if I go ahead and filter, I now have the offset values. So I want this thing rotating about 2 times in the 4 seconds of length of this composition. So I want to start at a value of 0 for both of them, and they're going to go in the opposite direction. So this one's going to go to a value of 2 rotations. This one's going to go to a value of -2 rotations. So the end result looks like this. So basically, I just have this path, a pattern. That is my box for the text that I'm going to be adding into this. Now, next, I am going to add a text layer. So I'm going to go new text, and I'm going to type the word fast. Now, this word, I am going to center both the center of the anchor point and center of the layer. So that would be Alt Home, Control Alt Home, Control Alt Home, or Control Command Home, and then Command Home or Alt Home will actually center the layer to the composition. So Control Home centers the layer to the composition. Control Alt Home or Command Control Home. Control. Let me repeat that. Control Alt and Home centers the anchor point to the center of the layer. Control Home centers the layer to the composition. Actually, I want to increase the size of these two things. So let me actually scale the whole thing up a little bit. There you go. And so now I have basically this. Now I want to animate that text in about 15 frames. So to do that, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and add some animators to this. And so I want to animate position. And I want to animate also opacity. So those are the two animators that I want to add in here. And I also want to animate the range selector for this. I want to offset it. So let's go ahead and start with the position. I want to set, this is the final position and final opacity for both. Over here at the beginning, I want to have a position of 150, let's say. So all the text is going to be coming in from here. And the opacity value for this is going to be 0 at this point. So basically the idea is that the characters will be coming in this way. Then I'll control how they come in through my offset on my range selector. So if I go ahead and change my offset value, let's say to, right now it's a value of 0. But if I go here, about 10 frames, 5 frames, and I start increasing it this way, you'll see what that basically is going to do to my text. So I had already set these up basically in order for them to come in utilizing these settings. And the values that actually work for me were to place the offset 0 at the very beginning to 100 at the end. So basically that is the setting. And as you see, they appear, they start moving in and appearing one at a time. Now let me offset. I want to see, this is the point where I at this point, all the characters are almost in except for the T. So I now need to play with the slider on with the keyframe on the opacity to be able to make that T disappear. So I'm going to start bringing in the endpoint until it disappears, which is right around there. And so that gives me the sensation that the text is appearing from behind the box or is appearing really fast into the box. If I add the motion blur to this, then it sells the effect. Okay, so that takes care of that. And if I want to do this for the outro, for the out part of this, which is a 4-second long composition, as you can see, I can copy all those keyframes, Control C, then place them about 15 frames before this composition ends, paste them, right click them, keyframe assistant, and time reverse the frames. Now you notice that it probably did time reverse the frames. The only thing that it didn't do was change the position of the keyframes. So I need to bring these two keyframes upstream to this point so they match the corresponding position on this end. So basically they're a reflection of one another. So now I have this set up. My text is coming in fast, and after 4 seconds of this animation, it leaves fast. Okay, so that's basically what I have done. Now I'm going to drop this composition into a new composition, into this composition here. Let me actually remove this from here. And I want to put in that title composition in here. So let's go ahead and drop in the title composition. As you notice, it basically takes up 4 seconds, and this composition itself is 10 seconds long. So now what's happening is that I can go in and stretch out the out point of this by pressing the Alt key and dragging. I can stretch it out. But what I am doing is basically time remapping that composition, which is basically I'm extending the time. So if I play this back, you will notice that my very fast title, as before, is now not so fast. And actually, it takes about almost 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds for the whole 1.5 seconds for the whole thing to come in, 1 second plus. So it's very slow. I actually wanted it to take 15 frames. That's what my intention was. I wanted that to be 15 frames. And same thing at the end is going to be very slow because the time that I have time stretched this is basically taking longer than 4 seconds. So let me undo that. And how do I protect that so that that intro and that outro take 15 frames as I intended? Well, to do that, let's go back to the previous composition right here. And I know that this is happening from 0 to 15. All of it is happening from 0 to 15, and then the last 15 frames of the animation is what I want to maintain. So in order to do that, I need to select and I need to set regions for protecting. In this case, the first region is going to be from 0 to 15. So I'm going to go ahead and place my time marker, and then you see this little arrow here. These are what we call markers. So if I click on a marker and drag it into the composition, you'll notice that I have a marker that snaps every frame or so. So with that marker at the very first frame, I want to press the Alt key on the keyboard, and I want to drag the second half. You notice that the cursor changes into the little pulling arrow. And when I click and drag, I am basically opening up that marker into 2 pieces. So that is the area that I have selected to be protected. Now, let me right click on any of those 2 half markers and go to its settings. And then right here where it says responsive design time, I need you to select protected region. I also want to give this a name, so I'm going to call it intro. And notice that the length is 15 frames. Click OK, and you notice that a blue bar appears on top of it. Now let me do the same thing for the outro. So I'm going to click a marker, drag it to the 15 frames before, press the Alt key, keep it pressed, and drag the endpoint of that marker to the endpoint. Now let's right click on any of the half markers, and then I'm going to call that outro. And I am going to protect that region as well. Click OK, and we're done. So basically these two things will not be changed or modified by what I was doing on the other composition. So let's go back to the extended composition and reintroduce that title into this. Now you'll notice that you have the regions, the protected regions showing up over here. And if I go ahead and stretch this out now, you'll notice that it allows me to stretch it out, but it maintains the actual outro and intro static. So if I play this back, I'm going to see my animation playing back in 15 frames, which is what I intended. And then it starts slowing down for the rest of it because that whole area got time remapped. It got stretched. And then when it gets to the end, it goes fast again, which is what the intent was for the composition. So that allows me to maintain areas of animation for which I want to maintain the speed of playback, for the rate of change of whatever property I had changed, and maintain that speed in any subsequent compositions into which I drop this.